Welcome to Oyate Today. Oyate in Lakota means people. Brought to you by Native Sun News Today. Hi, welcome to Oyate Today. I am your host, Richie Richards. Oyate Today is produced by Tim and Jackie Gallego. Tim is an enrolled member of the Oglala Sioux tribe. Our guests tonight, our very special guests tonight, are from recovery communities of South Dakota, Miss Annie Loyd and Sydney Keith Claymore. Thank you both for being here so much. I really appreciate you being here, and I appreciate the work you're doing in our community. So
Thanks for having us.
Definitely. Let's just jump right in. Let's tell us a little bit about yourselves. We're going to be talking about recovery in Rapid City specifically, so let's just kind of let people know who we are. And Sydney, you can go first, please.
Oh, I'm Sydney Claymore, and I'm been in recovery for 26 years and lived here for 35 in Rapid City. And I just want to bring recovery to the table of our communities and share with the community how recovery is wonderful. And I was just teasing earlier, but grassroots Oyate. I mean, we need to get that to that table and share with our people about how good recovery is, and it's a beautiful way of life.
Definitely. And prior to sobering up, I guess, how long were you using and what kind of struggles did you go through?
I started when I was 13, and I didn't really get severe until I was 22. And I drank for 6 years. I sobered up when I was 28. And I attribute my parents, Sydney and Shirley Keith, with that because I was born last, the youngest of 8, and so they role modeled sobriety and community activism and leadership, and because of that, then I knew I had to quit. I kept saying, I have children, I need to quit. So my husband and I quit at the same time.
Your husband being?
David Claymore.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. And congratulations on your recovery.
Yes.
And Annie, if you could tell us about yourself, please.
Hey, thanks for having us today. I appreciate that. I grew up here, and I started drinking when I was 10. And there was a sense of not belonging, of not fitting in, and I saw people around me drinking, and it seemed like the thing to do. And I can remember that first drink, and it burned all the way down, but there was this sense of ease and comfort. It was like I could take a deep breath. And I look at 10-year-olds today, and I'm like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Right? And I went to Catholic school here, and it was really well hidden, I guess. There was a lot of us that partied, but I always went that further mile. And by the time I got into college, I drank myself out of college down at Mount Marty. And so what any good person would do, I went to work at the state hospital and became a chemical dependency counselor.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I left for 30 years then after that, and went over to Los Angeles and worked in addiction recovery over there and with gangs, youth gangs, and was really successful. And I went through periods of time where I didn't drink, but I always was doing something. I always had some mind changer that I was using as a solution to deal with, the trauma I'd gone through as a kid and all the unresolved grief that I experienced. And I finally got sober in '92. We both we're close in age. We're born in the same year, and ironically, we have the same amount of recovery time.
Oh,
so
cool.
I too got sober in '92, and I got really fortunate when I cleaned up. I didn't realize that my life, like I had all this information about addiction, but I didn't know that applied to my life, because I really believe it had a lot to do with I have really light skin, so I didn't get arrested. But a lot of the folks I ran around with did. I stopped driving, so I didn't get a DUI. And I'd quit jobs before I'd get fired. So there weren't those typical interrupters that were going on. But I knew inside of myself that something had to change. It's like Sydney talked about. And somebody suggested that I not use for 30 days. And I said, well, I've done that. I've not used alcohol before. They're like, no, nothing. I was like all at the same time, like nothing at all? And they're like, yeah. And they suggested I go to a 12-step meeting, so I did. And been doing that and been involved ever since. Haven't stopped being involved. It changed my life.
So were there some early struggles, after that accomplishing the goal of the first 30 days then, and then you get into the 12-step program? Was that tough on you then?
I didn't feel like I fit in, but I joke that I got struck stupid. I stopped. There was something that happened, and some people call it like a spiritual awakening. People suggested that I go to these meetings, so I went. I went as often as I could, and I met people. I mean, Sydney and I weren't living in the same city at the time, but I met people like Sydney. I had this elder woman, we were talking, and she'd take me to Anipi's, down in Phoenix, and there were these other folks that just taught me how to do this thing. And I watched them go through divorces and maybe their children dying or a parent dying. I watched them go through all these life things without using a mind changer. I was like, wow. And it just became a way of life. I learned a new way of life because my old way of life was running away from all that. It scared me. Feelings scared me. I didn't know what to do with feelings. So I watched these people deal with it differently.
You make a good point. So many of us are afraid of feelings, and oh my goodness. But Sydney, what about you? Did you have a tough time whenever you came to sober up? I know your parents were role models for you, but...
Oh, yes. That first year, I always say I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy because there was a lot of healing as far as getting through those feelings of anger and the separation you feel from your family and your children especially. And but I got through it, and there's that overwhelming need though to feel better. You want to feel better, and the only way to do it is to reconnect with people. And I think having a strong culture and our spiritual traditions, that's what really played a role in my healing. And,
so you went to ceremonies?
I went to ceremony. I grew up that way anyway. And being who my parents were, they did an article on them during the Black Hills Powwow. And my husband is one of the founders of the Black Hills Powwow. He's one of the 4.
Sure.
And he was only like 24, and we were still using. And they interviewed my parents, and for an article, they interviewed my parents, and they were talking, and they said that they believe in prayer. And they said because we prayed for one of our daughters to sober up, and she's sober today. And I went to them when I read the article in the newspaper, and I said, "Who are you talking about?" And they said, "You."
Oh, wow.
They said, "We prayed and prayed for you, and you're sober today."
That's awesome.
And so when they both journeyed home to the Star Nation, I was sober, and I was glad to give them that gift. And even though I can never say I will never drink again, I still go to meetings. I still go to 12-step meetings. I still lead circles, because I need that. I need that to for me, for myself.
Sure.
So.
Sure. And we're going to get into our discussion about recovery in Rapid City, but Annie, could you tell me how you feel about where we are with recovery here in Rapid City and some of the issues that you've come across, because you've been in the field, boots on the ground for some time. How do you feel about where we are with recovery here in Rapid City?
So I returned home about 6 years ago and started getting involved, and I went around and I interviewed more than 300 people. Just to figure out, because that's who I am, and I wanted to know what was going on.
Sure.
Before you jump in and think you know everything. And as you said, I came from, Phoenix and LA, where I'd seen a lot of things going on. And what I noticed was I'd go to these meetings and I'd be one of the only people in recovery at the meetings. And I noticed that there weren't hardly any American Indians at the table. I thought, they're talking about us without us there, right? And this lived experience, when we got sober, our lived experience are the people that we learned from. Those people that had walked the path before us, right? Which is both cultural and traditional and practical.
Sure.
Right? And I didn't see that. And so I started asking questions. And so little by little, people like Sheriff Kevin Tome would ask more questions and want to learn more. And Barry Tice over at Pennington County was interested in what I put forward. And so then I contacted SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Agency of the federal government. And I said, what are other communities doing that we're not doing here? Because what I saw going on here was worse than what I had witnessed as a kid growing up here.
Mm. So it had gotten worse since you left. Mm.
And there was such a disconnection. And there was this heavy hand with incarceration, and I wasn't understanding that. I didn't understand, because addiction is a disease, like no different than diabetes, only it's a brain disease. And so our brain is allergic to these mind changers of drugs and alcohol and opiates and narcotics. It's allergic to it. And we have this violent reaction to it. And so I contacted SAMHSA, and SAMHSA said, well, there's these recovery communities organizations, RCOs, around the nation, and South Dakota doesn't have one.
You know, let's stop there. Let's take a break. This is where it gets good. We'll be back after a short break.
Closed captioning for Oyate today is brought to you by Black Hills Energy.
Native Sun News has been voted the best weekly newspaper in its class for 2015 by the South Dakota and North Dakota Newspaper Associations. You can find a copy of the Native Sun News at many businesses and vending machines in Rapid City and the surrounding area, and on all 9 reservations. We publish every Wednesday, so advertisers and subscribers can reach our diverse readership by calling 605-721-1266. The Native Sun News covers the other side of the story.
You can't predict life's ups and downs. You just give it all you've got to stay on top. But it's easier with a partner like Security First Bank. Since 1898, we've been riding with you through the country's biggest ups and downs. And this is where we'll stay. Security First Bank, a relationship you can count on. Member FDIC.
I want some more.
What's he doing?
But he can't.
Look at him. It's just not done.
Please, sir, I want some more.
More? More?
More? Please, sir.
He has asked for!
Thank you.
What?
Well, he did say please. Sir.
Yes, he did. And thank you.
Yeah, and thank you.
He's a wonderful boy. A delightful boy.
Please, and thank you. Pass it on.
Thank you.
Hi, welcome back to Oyate Today. Once again, our guests tonight are Annie Loyd and Sydney Claymore. Thank you both for being here tonight, and once again, thank you for sharing your stories. Those are very intimate, and but it's very powerful for our listeners to hear as well, because we have a lot of people struggling in our community. So thank you once again. And if you can continue on with the point that we were making before the break and where we are in Rapid City currently, so please.
So there's been these conversations, Rapid City community conversations, collective impact, the conversation about One Heart, all of that. And what I witnessed in these conversations was there was such a desire for something to happen. There were so few voices, though, from the recovery community, from those of us with lived experience at the table. And so that's where Recovery Communities of South Dakota came about, this coalition of people.
Sure.
And to bring our voice to the table. Because many of us are without agency, meaning that we don't work for Catholic Social Services or Lutheran Social Services or Pennington County or law enforcement. We are individuals who have been out in the community doing this, not because we're so wonderful, I don't think, it's because we can't not.
Yeah.
These are relatives. These are our friends. It's people knock on your door or call you at 2 in the morning. Of course you're going to take the phone call. Or somebody calls and they're having a hard time, you're going to stop what you're doing and talk to them. And It's that connection that we need. There's no quick solution, Richie. There's no silver bullet. You know, medical assisted treatment, which is the big thing now, it's a great interrupter. Treatment's an interrupter, but it's not a solution. It's not long-term solution. Long-term solution are these relationships.
Do you think then, and this kind of just came to me, but do you think then, because you made a good point, that you said that these are our relatives. It's a native viewpoint, it's a native term in calling somebody that isn't technically our relatives, our relations, but yet at the same time we call them relatives because of that sisterhood or brotherhood that we may have with them, or that shared history, or whatever the case may be. When you look at it from a non-native perspective then, and these non-native organizations or non-native led organizations, and they don't view them as relatives, they don't call them relatives, these are their 9-to-5s kind of a thing, and so you have this gap in time on the weekends, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. the next morning, where they're not giving the attention to those people who may need it. So do you think that's part of what we're dealing with here?
Totally. It's those people. These people, those people, them. You know, the preponderance of crisis happened at midnight, not at noon. Right? We don't have transportation, right? We don't have bus service for folks. You know, you don't have money. You get out of prison. So if you're a woman coming out of prison, you have no money, you have no job, you have no place to live, you have a felony, so you can't even get a decent job, right? Then how are you going to get to your appointments at behavior management systems, or, you know, wherever it is, and satisfy all this? And then maybe you have to do, you know, your urine analysis and 24/7 and all this other stuff. And on top of it, you have a brain disease. And we forget that. This is no different than somebody getting a concussion in the wintertime that falls on the ice and cracks their head. You have a brain disease. Your brain is not working, and we need each other to walk with each other to say, man. And even at all these years of sobriety, the two of us stay in touch with each other, particularly more now than we have, and rely upon that.
Do you think then that there's a little bit of unnecessary pressure or some anxiety that's created from having to do those 6 a.m. UAs or maybe PBTs, or I'm not completely certain what those all are, but
how are you going to get your kids to school, feed your kid, get your kids up, get them to school, feed them, do all those responsibilities, and still get in to do your PBT, your breathalyzer, your urine analysis, or whatever it is before 8 in the morning, and get transportation for that? That's a tremendous amount. That's difficult for any of us to pull off that are supposedly healthy and well-adjusted than somebody who's just figuring out how to live life. There's got to be a better way.
plus the cost of all that.
The cost is exorbitant.
How do you feel about this then, Sydney?
Well, that's where I feel like when I say grassroots Oyate, I mean, we need that support. Instead of maybe having them do the UAs, why don't they have them go to 12-step? I mean, they do that, but they don't follow through. They don't follow them. They don't encourage them. It's just kind of a thing that's thrown out there. But I wouldn't be here sober today had I not gone to 12-step, have I not had those relationships with sisters and brothers that I meet, and I call them that, and the non-Indians might not, but it's still like a sacred community to me, because we share things in an hour that we won't normally say to anybody else. So in a 12-step setting, we're really getting real personal, and we share what goes on in the day. And those women really love that. When we go into these treatment centers and detox and we have these meetings, it's like they've been waiting. It's like that's what they need, and they get that healing. But the minute they leave those facilities, it's gone, you know? And then we get those 2 o'clock calls, and then they give up. They immediately give up because they have this huge mountain to climb, especially just trying to be accepted again and reconnect. You know, they're so separated with being shamed, you know, about being an addict and how they got into prison, you know, and with these interrupters, they're not doing much. We just need that everyday life way. You know, we have Lakowi Choha in our community. That's everyday life. That's everyday way of life for us. Well, this is added into it with talking circles, you know, so that's kind of where I'm at with that, is I think that's a big...
You made a good point there in the blaming and the shaming. It seems like there's a lot of that happening in our community, especially very recently.
Yes.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back after a couple of minutes.
When discrimination happens in our community, and it does happen,
then it's time to stand up
and speak out to make it stop.
Discrimination hurts and excludes.
We can be better than that.
People of Black Hills have a connection to each other, and none of us deserve discrimination.
The Rapid City Human Relations Commission can help with discrimination issues in housing, employment, and public accommodations.
And each of us, when we see it or hear it, can do our part to end discrimination.
You have a responsibility to stand up and speak out.
More than 2 million men and women have served in our military since 9/11. Now, many of them are transitioning back into civilian life. They're considering career options, writing resumes, starting businesses. ACP AdvisorNet can help. ACP AdvisorNet is a nonprofit online community where Americans can offer career advice to those who have served. Now we can serve those who served us by helping them to find their next career. Visit acpadvisornet.org.
Hi, welcome back to Oyate Today. Once again, our guests tonight are Sydney Keith Claymore and Annie Loyd. Thank you so much for being here, and definitely thank you for the work you're doing and just your general interest in improving our community. So thank you both, okay? Annie, if you could talk to us about what is the Healing Forest now? I've heard about this. What is this now?
So there's this great movement that's occurred across the country that came from elders. And it came from a really famous psychologist named Erik Erikson, referring to the Healing Forest model. So in brief, it's this notion that you could take a tree that's sick in the forest, take that tree out, get it new soil, get it healthy, put it back in the forest, and it gets sick again. So if we think of somebody who's suffering from addiction, alcoholism, the result of trauma, unresolved grief, right? And we bring them out of the community, so we take them out, we get them out to treatment, right? And they're out there for a year, and we bring them back into the community that is still unhealed. And they end up getting sick again, and then we shame them and guilt them and blame them, and you didn't do this, and why, blah, 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 you know, and eventually they get arrested again, and the cycle goes over again. And compounded shame and guilt. And the notion is that all of us, no matter who you are, native or non-native, drinking or not drinking, in a religious community, not, traditional or not, all of us are affected by this disease of alcoholism and addiction, trauma and grief. All of us are. All of us are impacted by historical trauma, particularly in this region. So we all have a responsibility in this. This isn't for the police to deal with, or for a psychiatrist to deal with, or for an agency to deal with. This is for all of us to figure out how we can be involved in participating, creating a healing community that allows for us to grow in relationship with one another. That requires us to pause when something happens. So that means looking at conflict as not being resolved, but as an opportunity for transformation. The Healing Forest model is about transformation. It takes time and practice and patience. It's not going to happen overnight. The things that occurred to all of us that we experienced didn't happen overnight. The healing's not going to happen overnight, and that's why within the Lakota tradition, there's these great ceremonies. There are traditions, there are elders that have great wisdom as to how we can walk this red road of well-briety. So we talk about well-briety being not just sobriety, but wellness, creating a new way of living. And Don Koyas has been one of those mentors for a lot of us in creating that movement of well-briety, and these all bringing the traditions back and seeking the guidance from elders.
Definitely, definitely. And Sydney, what message do you have for our community based on our conversation tonight?
Well, I just want them to know that there is a place for us at these tables she's mentioned. You know, like there hasn't been very many American Indians in those conversations. I mean, there's some, but we need to bring this out. We need to bring it out from the shadow of, like I was saying earlier, that if you're struggling with addictions, you're shamed. You're, you have a lot of shame. And I used to use that shame and guilt to stay drunk and stay using. But I use it now to keep me sober because I know they're still out there. And, but I love these conversations. I'm one of those few that aren't really out there, but now I am. I've been in the community, but I want this to be, to show the youth that there's a better way. And it's being honest with yourself, and it's being loving and caring, like well-briety. It's not just sobriety. It's about wellness and, healing. And that's kind of what I'd like to say.
That's awesome. You're awesome. Thank you. Annie, will you briefly tell us about your message to our community as well?
So the message to the community is reach out to us. Let us know what you're doing in the community. So this coalition is about everybody that's doing things, not just the agencies and organizations. Individuals in our communities, our grandmothers, our grandfathers, our moms, our aunties. There's so many people doing amazing things. And let's work together and help support one another in doing that. Most importantly, if you need help, if you know somebody that does need help, reach out for it however you can. And you can get us on the internet.
Thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you for coming in as well and everything that you're doing. Like you had mentioned, everybody needs to be involved, and I think we at Oyate today has been very involved. We are a platform for healing for our community. I want to thank our producers. I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank Prairie Edge for hosting our show tonight, and I want to thank you for making Oyate Today a part of your night. You've been watching Oyate Today, brought to you by Native Sun News Today.